Hi everyone, I'm Melissa Nielsen and this is my dyslexia presentation. My first student that I'm going to give you a little bit of background on is Kyla. She is a first grade student that has been retained. She was considered up for retention after starting in her current school in the spring of last year. She was lacking many of the foundational skills learned in kindergarten, which hindered her from making enough progress to move into the second grade. Zach is also a first grade student that is below grade level across his academic areas of reading, writing, and math, and he can be described as someone who is a perfectionist that is very hard on himself. My rationale for choosing these students is both Kyla and Zach were chosen to participate in the various assessments as they both demonstrate some of the characteristics found in individuals diagnosed with dyslexia. Kyla specifically has a very hard time in developing her understanding of letter names and sounds. This was a rather long and difficult process for her that hindered a lot of her learning, which resulted in her retention in first grade. Zach holds the majority of the characteristics that are found to be present in children with dyslexia. Zach is found to have difficulty in organizing both written and spoken language and is easily overwhelmed with tasks that require this. Zach also has a hard time with identifying rhyming words and having the ability to separate phonemes within words to assist in his decoding. Both students are ones that I felt would be good for practicing using these assessments, and both have some characteristics of dyslexia that we've talked about this term. The assessments that I chose these assessments based on the definition of dyslexia that was discussed this term. Dyslexia is a specific learning disability that is neurological in origin. It is characterized by difficulties with accurate and or fluent word recognition and by poor spelling and decoding abilities. The first assessment that I gave these students was Is It Dyslexia by the Davis Association International. Then I gave the San Diego Quick Assessment of Reading Ability, and then finally the Yop-Singer Test of Phoneme Segmentation. For the first assessment, Is It Dyslexia? This was an informal assessment of questions completed by the student's teacher, so I completed this for both of my students, and the areas of focus are on disorientation, reading and spelling, attention focus, math and time management, coordination, handwriting, and self-esteem. So based on questions that I answered about both of these students, the findings were for Kyla that she is talented in art, drama, music, sports, dance, and her strategic thinking. Her biggest problem areas are in the general academic, memory, and or cognition. She has moderate difficulties with vision, reading, and or spelling, listening and speech, behavior, health, development, and or personality, and she has mild difficulties in writing and her motor skills. For Zach, he's talented in art, drama, music, sports, storytelling, and his biggest problem areas are his general academic, listening and or speech, math and or time management, memory and or cognition, and he has moderate difficulties with writing and his motor skills, behavior, health, and development, and his personality. For Kyla, these results were ones that I would expect for her. I see a lot of difficulty in her general academics. I also see that listening and explaining what she needs may be difficult for her. She has a hard time expressing some of those needs, and especially when using academic language. Her reading and spelling are often difficult to understand and kind of work through why she's making certain errors, so I see a lot of difficulty there. And then for Zach, he continues to be developing in that foundational understanding of basic concepts in reading, writing, and math. So I see that he's having difficulty there. And he's also showing, these results showed that he has difficulty in memory and recalling, which I think leads to difficulty with cognition, especially in those general academic areas. The next assessment that I gave was the San Diego Quick Assessment of Reading Ability, and on this test, tests were measured on recognition of words that were outside of a context, so it was just based on lists. For Kyla, she was able to make no errors on her pre-primer list, which means that was her independent level. For the primer list, she was working at an independent level there with only one error. Her grade 1 list, she had 2 errors, so that was her instructional level, which is appropriate for the grade level that she's in. And then for her grade 2 list, she had 7 errors, and so that was found to be at a frustration level. For Kyla, some of those words in the primer level are going to be like you, come, not, with, jump. And in the grade 1 level, that is her instructional level. So we have words such as bigger, how, always, night, today. And then the grade 2 lists are words such as myself, early, wide, carefully. So she really struggled with the grade 2 list, but her grade 1, her instructional level was appropriate for her. For Zach, his results showed that his pre-primer level was independent. He had 1 error on that list, which had words such as see, play, me, at, run, go, which I find to be a lot of the kindergarten sight words that he's familiar with. And then he had 3 errors on his primer level, which is then determined as a frustration level with making 3 errors. And those were words like you, come, not, with. Based on these results of the San Diego Quick Assessment of Reading Ability, it can be determined that Kyla is at an instructional level of first grade words and that second grade words are at a frustration level for her. Independently, Kyla should be reading text with words that are at the pre-primer and primer level. For Zach, he is showing that he's currently reading words at the pre-primer level, which I talked about are more of those kindergarten sight words. And he also finds words in the primer to be at a frustration level. So when completing this assessment, Zach was sounding out words as a strategy, but he could not put these words back together in order to read them correctly. So this is something I see a lot with him, that he knows his letter names and his letter sounds, and he's able to stretch these pieces out, but he really has a difficulty in putting the sounds all together. During this assessment, it was found that Zach is not reading grade level words and finds frustration early when approached with tasks of reading in a general sense. So this goes back to him being a perfectionist and how he doesn't like making mistakes, and so he often will result in wanting to give up. The next assessment that I gave was the Yop-Singer test of phoneme segmentation. And for this assessment, students were given 22 common words and asked to break these words into segmented phoneme parts. This is a skill that we've been working on a lot this school year, and so it was interesting to see the results. For Kyla, she was able to successfully segment 20 of the 22 words at 90% accuracy. Zach was able to successfully segment 13 of 22 words at 59% accuracy. The implications of these results from the Yop-Singer test of phoneme segmentation. Kyla showed that she's doing very well in understanding her phonemic awareness and has established an understanding of how words are broken up into various sound parts. The errors that Kyla made were both on 2-syllable words such as me and at. She's seeing these as one part, which then makes her say it incorrectly. Some brief reteaching is needed for her in order to strengthen her understanding of syllables within words to scaffold her spelling understanding. For Zach, he had a hard time with segmenting words correctly. It is demonstrated in his results that the only words that he was able to correctly segment were CVC words such as cat, hat, pig. During the assessment, Zach was trying to see words visually, and some of his errors were due to him knowing how many letters were in a given word, such as find and keep. He knew that both of these words were 4-letter words, therefore he wanted to segment the words into 4 separate parts. So he, again, is going back to knowing his letter names and knowing his letter sounds, but he is not able to find familiar chunks and put them together. So that was demonstrated in this assessment as well with him. And based on all of these assessments, I have created a few accommodations and supports for each student. So for Kyla, based on her assessments, it would be shown that she would benefit from intervention most in the area of word recognition. Based on the San Diego Quick Assessment, Kyla is not showing the ability to read words out of context with 100% accuracy. It is shown that she is at an instructional level at her current grade level, but would benefit from intervention in this area in order to make significant progress into the second grade lists. We will focus on the following of work on word families. We will work to understand spelling patterns. We will identify the onset and rhyme of words. Each of these things will really help with her quick word recognition. Words for quick recognition will be pulled from her grade appropriate text and given to Kyla before reading. Identification of these words will be practiced prior to reading a text to develop fluency and comprehension of these words. Kyla will also have word rings, which she will practice frequently during independent read to self time during her daily 5 rotations. These focus on sight words, common words that were found in her grade appropriate text, so that she's continuing to practice these words that are not in context. So when she sees them in context, she gets them quick. And then for Zach, some accommodations and supports for him were that based on the assessments, Zach it can be determined that he would benefit from intensive interventions in the following areas. He really needs to work on his word recognition. He really needs to work on his phonemic awareness and understanding of words and parts of words and how they make up sounds. He also needs some more practice on his phonemic segmentation. To meet Zach's needs for intervention, he will engage in rigorous phonemic awareness routines daily. This is where we practice simple word routines where we practice onset and rhyme, and we work on how many word parts. We really practice counting out those syllables. It's something that I like to call with my students just a word play, and it's kind of how do we manipulate words. Let's count the number of words in a sentence and kind of getting a general understanding of language and literacy together. With a better understanding of phonemic awareness, Zach will also strengthen his skills in word recognition. He will practice identifying word parts within words to help with his quick recognition within text. And for both of my students, there will be some technology integrated into their daily lesson routines. And so different forms will be used for both Kyla and Zach's development of skills that they need based on the assessments that were completed. One of the tools of technology that I would use would be Poplet. This is a great iPad or tablet application that can be used right within your guided reading, and it really focuses on phonemic awareness and word segmentation. Students are actually seeing words, physically breaking them apart, and then you can color code. It's a very interactive sort of writing activity in order to segment words. Also, we would focus with the technology of syllable counting HD, which is also an application used on the iPad or tablet to practice identifying the number of syllables within words. And last, I would use Parrotfish, which is an application for the iPad for word recognition. It's a very interactive type of a application that I would have them use during their independent practice time during their daily 5 instruction. It has a lot of pictures for students to identify, and then they work on quickly identifying those words. Those words are then put into sentences, and they're really engaging. There's lots of videos and very interactive. Based on the assessments that were used, some of the dyslexia implications that can be understood is that Kyla is showing signs of being a little slower on grasping her fundamental reading concepts. I would not say that at this point she would be considered a dyslexic student, but further evaluation and testing is needed in order to determine this. For Zach, based on his assessments and through daily observation in the classroom, Zach would be a good candidate for further dyslexia screening. The assessments show currently that Zach is showing signs of early reading difficulty and lack in specifically in the area of phonemic awareness. It can be determined that these students will need to continue receiving interventions and services within their school to support their language and literacy needs. And these are my references. Thank you for listening.